Lazerboy, what is the secret of your powers?
Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome back to the Lazerboy podcast. We're in episode 32. We're doing the top 10 films of 2002. I'm your host, the Lazerboy, Joseph No. I'm here with a very special guest. He's an actor, writer, director, and my old friend from college, from film school, Chris Cotto. How you doing, Chris?
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, thank you so much for being on the show, man. I'm really looking forward to hearing what your top 10 lists are.
Yeah, and I love talking about movies and ranking them and dissecting them, and I'm interested to see how close or different our lists are.
Right. Yeah, same here, man. You can find more episodes on the website and blog at the Lazerboy, Lazerboy with a Z, .wordpress.com, and find past episodes on YouTube. Just type in the Lazerboy. I think that's the only result that comes up, the Lazerboy with a Z, and we can find past episodes there. And wanted to plug quickly our sponsor, PV Brands Payment. PV Brands Payment is a payment processing app specializing in high-risk businesses like CBD and online gambling, and it converts crypto in minutes very quickly. So if you guys want to check that out for a free quote, just go ahead and check the link in the description of the YouTube episode that's going to be published, so check that out. And this episode is going to be a typical one where we talk about our honorable mentions and then go right into our top 10 films of 2002 from 10 to 1. And we're probably going to go each do 10 and then each do 9 and so on and so forth. So, that sound good to you, Chris?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Awesome. So I wanted to ask you, Chris, I know it's been a long time since we talked in person or just talked in general. I know I seen you on like Facebook and stuff like that, but what were you like in 2002 as a person, and what movies and shows did you watch?
That would have been before I got into acting.
Mm-hmm.
So I was more of a baseball player.
Oh.
And I watched a lot of action movies, spy thrillers, Star Wars, Batman, all that stuff. And this is before Batman Begins.
Yeah.
So all we had were the two Burtons and the two Schumacher ones.
Right.
But the two Burton ones are some of my favorite movies ever.
Yeah.
In fact, Batman was the reason I got into acting, was to play Batman.
Wow.
Like Michael Keaton is my favorite actor, and I still think he's the best Batman. And I'm really upset about the Warner Brothers decision to cancel Batgirl.
Oh yeah.
Because now they're depriving us of Michael Keaton donning the suit again. And he was also supposed to be in the Aquaman movie. He had a cameo, but I guess it confused test audiences, so they're like reshooting his part with Ben Affleck.
Oh no.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm just. I mean, I like Ben Affleck as Batman, but I'm just disappointed that that's 2 times that Michael Keaton filmed as Batman, and they're not going to show it to us.
Is he not going to be in the Ezra Miller Flash?
I think they might end up reshooting that too if it's too confusing. I think what happened was that was supposed to come out like before Aquaman, and it would have paved the way for his cameo in Aquaman, but because Aquaman was, I guess, slated to come out first, it didn't make sense because they didn't like set it up. So I think that's their decision. So I'm holding out hope that he's still going to be in the Flash.
Yeah, if Ezra Miller doesn't mess up again, right?
Yeah, if he doesn't take his own franchise.
Contingent on that fact.
Yeah, and I hear that they might just do a one and done with him too.
Uh-huh.
I think like they're in too deep to replace him now, but I think that this will probably be the only Flash movie he does. But that is coming from no knowledge. That is just like a stomach guess.
Right. So were you you were in high school at the time, or you're in college already?
Yeah, I was in high school.
Okay.
2002.
So you're a high school baseball player?
Yeah.
Awesome. Did you play any in college at all, or?
In college, no.
Okay.
No, God, no. I played. I went to Cal State Fullerton. They had way too good of a baseball team.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was about to say. I was like, man, you could have made it.
Yeah, no. They like I would have.
Uh-huh.
But again, like I was starting to get into acting. Well, I was heavily into acting by the time I got to college. So it was an easier decision for me to kind of back out of baseball. I wanted to play in junior college, and I went to talk to the coach about trying out, and he basically told me not to bother.
Oh no!
Like without even a tryout. Like he didn't know me or anything. But that was the thing, is that I think they, and this is a junior college, but I think they recruited players. So because I was never on the radar, they're just like, don't bother.
Yeah.
So and I should have showed up anyway, because it's an open tryout, so I could have gone anyway. Right. But I was already acting at the time, and I'm like, all right, fine. If I'm going to show up to a tryout that he doesn't even want me at anyway, then I'm not going to bother.
Right.
But yeah, so my playing days. Oh, I won't say they stopped in high school, because I did play in an adult league outside of that.
Mm-hmm.
I still go to my alumni games at my high school too.
Oh, very cool.
So I play like once a year.
What's your favorite?
I'm actually trying to find an adult league again, but
oh yeah, that'd be super cool.
I have to wait for my schedule to settle down.
What's your favorite baseball movie? Very cool, man. So watching some of these movies, you probably brings you back to your high school days, huh?
Yeah, and reminded me how juvenile some of the humor was back then too.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, some of these have not aged well.
Some of them, so Kung Pao. Do you remember that movie, Kung Pao Enter the Fist?
Is that the Jack Black? He's a panda.
It was like a.
Oh, that's Kung Fu Panda. Oh.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no! Yeah, it's kind of like a Stephen Chow or something, right? He's like a parody kind of martial arts sports movie.
It took old Asian martial art films and dubbed them poorly.
Oh yeah.
And just made its own story out of it.
Okay.
And it was really, I thought it was hilarious when it came out. I thought it was like the funniest thing ever. And I still quote it sometimes, but I'm quite afraid to watch it again, because I have a feeling it's not going to age very well.
Yeah.
And whoever else, like everybody that saw that movie is probably going, or yeah, depending on their memory of it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I know my dad hated it.
Right. For me, I was very 2002, I was like 2 years removed from high school. I was in a community college, Cypress College, so not too far from where I live. And then I remember I was very kind of...
That's where I went too.
Oh, you went to Cypress? Okay,
Yeah.
We have a lot more in common than I thought. Okay, that's cool. So we're both Chargers and Titans.
Yeah.
There you go. Very cool. We probably crossed paths and we didn't even know. Did you take?
They didn't have, Cypress College didn't have a film anything at the time.
Well, they have
screenwriting.
Yeah. Did you take a screenwriting class there?
Yeah.
With Mr. Rosenberg?
Rosenberg, yeah.
Holy that guy's my favorite teacher, dude. He got me
Really?
into so many good film. Yeah, turned me on to so much great film. If it wasn't for him, I probably would be like a lame, I don't know. I was into a lot of lame movies, so.
Yeah, it did open me up to a lot of movies. In fact, I kind of credit that class with getting me into Jimmy Stewart movies.
Oh my God! Yeah, he had the Vertigo
Jimmy
poster,
Stewart's
right?
One of my favorite actors, and I know, he's a big Vertigo fan. He's a big Hitchcock fan.
He's a big Hitchcock fan. He loves Vertigo.
And I really loved watching those Hitchcock movies, Rear Window and Vertigo.
Do you remember?
And then I went back and watched It's a Wonderful Life, and that changed everything. That's in my top 10 films.
Oh my God! I know we're off in a little tangent here, but do you remember? I know he's also a big fan of John Sayles, which I love too. Which he was kind of like the lesser.
He showed us Lone Star, I remember.
Right, and John Sayles is kind of like the lesser Robert Altman, kind of like an ensemble, kind of hyperlink kind of guy. And he's also into... did he ever show you the Three Colors trilogy?
He showed us Red.
Yes. He loves that movie so much.
Yeah.
It's hilarious how many times we saw clips from that movie. But Yeah.
He had a very dare I say pretentious taste in movies.
Absolutely. Yeah.
He thumbed his nose, at me for kind of talking about how much I love Batman Begins and stuff.
Oh man, that's not cool.
And how like into Star Wars I was. But yeah, I mean he was respectful about the script. So because everybody in that class was writing these like pretentious art house drama things that that you just roll your eyes at.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, I'm just gonna write like a slasher movie.
Right.
So that was the first script I ever wrote. It was called The Vent. And it's about an alien that invades a snowed-in indoor school, and it was like an alien picking the kids off and the staff off from the vents of the school.
Okay.
Still haven't done anything with that script. I mean, it's not very good. I've rewritten it a couple times.
Right.
And one of these days I intend to go back to it. But that was my very first script.
Yeah. Well, whose first screenplay is good, and I mean, unless you're a prodigy. I remember me being like a completely I don't want to say like leftist socialist, but I was very into like social justice. I was very I listened to a lot of Rage Against the Machine, and then I wrote like I was probably one of those guys that wrote a pretentious script, so shamefully, but
do you remember the script that you worked on in that class?
Yeah, it was like a coming of age story about a kid who was of two worlds, and his father is very conservative and his mother is very liberal, and then he
interesting.
Or something along those lines, and he just became like tired of the system, and then he became like an anarchist, and then he joined like a group of he read like the anarchist cookbook and stuff. So it's like just me channeling that side of my personality into that script, and kind of wish fulfillment, like what I would do as an extremist, like radical, and it was just pretty much shit, but I do remember it just being of that world. And I remember watching like Bowling for Columbine with a friend of mine who took us to watch that with his political science class, and I just remember it was like the greatest thing I've ever seen, not just because of the message of it, but of how it wasn't like any documentary I've ever seen. It was just like so engaging, like, and it was so almost like pop art. Like it was just like it was like a piece of entertainment. I never thought a documentary could be so entertaining. But
yeah, I mean, I have to say I'm not like a huge Michael Moore fan, but he is a talented filmmaker, and he's funny too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what I mean. Me neither. I'm far from that viewpoint of when I was a kid. Of course, when you're younger, you're more idealistic, right? So that really just spoke to me at the time. But yeah, cool, man. I just wanted to get a cool glimpse of how both of us were like back in the day. It seems like we're very similar in terms of like where we came from and what school we went to. So that's something.
I mean, 2002. That was a transition time for me, I think.
Okay.
Where I was playing high school baseball. I thought that I was still going to be a baseball player, and then I went through my high school program, which wasn't very good, and I started feeling like what else am I going to do? And I remember in 6th grade I actually told myself I'm going to be a baseball player, and if that doesn't work out, I'm going to be an actor.
Mm-hmm.
And if that doesn't work out, I'm going to join the military and go into law enforcement.
Right.
So
you had a plan, though. That's great.
Yeah. So I when baseball wasn't working out, I went to the next one on my list, which is acting.
Yeah, and you stuck with it ever since.
Acting is it's I've seen far more success with that than with baseball.
Oh, that's great, man. Well, I wish you the.
I actually wish I had the mental fortitude back then that I had now, because I probably would have gotten a lot farther in baseball. But I think I took a lot of things for granted back then. I've learned a lot in the years since.
Right. Well, you've come a long way, man, my friend, and I'm really proud of you. And thanks for sharing that. Let me before we get into our honorable mentions, let me read some trivia from the wiki here. So 2002 was the first year to see 3 films cross the $800 million milestone, surpassing the previous year's record of two $800 million films. Now it's like multiple $1 billion films, right? So that's nothing. But
Yeah.
it also
So just 3 movies?
3 films, yes.
Oh.
Do you want to? I love doing this trivia game with my friends. We always do like, what's the highest grossing movie of a particular year? I can't play because I have the list right in front of me. What? Shot in the Dark. What do you think the highest grossing film of 2002 was worldwide? I'll give you a guess. I'll give you a hint. It's a franchise film.
Yeah, no, I have a feeling. I would say Attack of the Clones.
Oh, very good guess. It's number 4, Attack of the Clones. Lord of the Rings:
Oh,
The Two
okay.
Towers is number 1, followed by Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Number 3 was Spider Man.
Yeah, okay, so those were the exact 4 that I was thinking of. That's why I was surprised when it was only 3.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So I
Uh-huh.
I got the exact wrong answer, but yeah.
Here's another piece of trivia: is actually the first Star Wars film not to be the highest grossing film of the year. Spider Man is the first film to make $100 million during its opening weekend, adjusted to inflation. The Pianist, directed by Roman Polanski, wins the Palme d'Or. Paramount Pictures reveals a new logo. I'm just reading a bunch of like important events here.
Yeah,
Chicago won Best Film at the next year for that year at the Academy Awards. Polanski wins Best Director for The Pianist. Adrian Brody wins
and got a standing ovation.
for and kissed Halle Berry. I
Yeah.
remember that. Nicole Kidman wins for The Hours. Chris Cooper for Adaptation. Catherine Zeta-Jones for Chicago. I'm just all right. Yeah, cool. All right, so yeah, that's what happened during this year. I just want to give you guys, our audience, what little of you guys are out there, some context as to what's going on this year. Let's get right into our honorable mentions. Let's go, starting with you, Chris.
Well, I mean, I've got a lot. One thing that's kind of interesting about this year in doing the research for this is that this was a big year for franchises. There were a lot of sequels made, and there were a lot of first movies of franchises made as well. So that I found that kind of interesting. I mean, this is the only year that I've done research on, so maybe that's every year. But I noticed that there were a lot of sequels, and a lot of mediocre sequels.
Oh.
Like the sequels weren't the best in a lot of cases.
No, you're not wrong. We started this podcast with 99, and then you wouldn't believe how many franchise starters were on that list, being Star Wars and The Matrix. But surprisingly, there are a lot of, original IP.
99 was a great year.
It's a great year. Yeah, that's why I did that podcast, because I was like, man, that was like the golden age of cinema, almost, like for groundbreaking films, like The Sixth Sense, Fight Club, so many great original content as well as franchises. So, but please continue what you're saying.
Yeah, so I feel the need to shout out Attack of the Clones for the reason that it meant a lot to me at the time.
Yeah.
The movie has, the more I watch it, the less I kind of like it. But I do still think that there are awesome moments in that movie, and I think that John Williams did some of his best work on that movie.
Right, the love theme. Oh my God.
Yeah, and there's some good stuff about it. It's still better than Phantom Menace, in my opinion. Revenge of the Sith had its issues, but I think that it's actually a pretty good film.
Sure.
But anyway, it didn't make my lists, but I feel the need to shout it out. Same with Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets.
Okay.
It's another movie that it's not my favorite of the Potter films, but I like how dark it goes. And it was on my list until other movies kind of pushed it off. And then a couple others. Well, Die Another Day. It's a Bond movie, which I think a lot of people think of it as one of the worst Bond movies.
Is it the one with
But,
Halle Berry? Who's in it?
Yeah, Halle Berry.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's in North Korea and stuff. And
Hmm.
Bond gets taken captive, and
Is it the one where he like flies out of a helicopter and just like hops on some skis? 'Cause I remember something
yeah,
absurd like that
yeah.
happens in one of them, and I was just like, I checked out.
He,
The
he
rest.
surfs an iceberg in it,
Oh god. Okay. All right.
and and he has the invisible car. But yeah, I mean, I'm a big Bond fan, so I shout out that movie. A better spy film that came out in 2002 is The Bourne Identity.
Mm-hmm.
And that spawned a franchise, of course, and that's a really good movie that I had a hard time leaving off my list.
Yeah.
And two that just missed the cutoff, Adaptation and Punch Drunk Love.
Okay.
And those were, they honestly could be interchanged with my number 10, and it probably would, it would be the same list to me. So it's really just a numbers game. I could only pick 10, so some of these fell off because I couldn't do it. And there are also other enjoyable movies that came out that year that I liked, like Van Wilder and Cabin Fever, those kinds of movies.
Right.
Austin Powers, Goldmember, that movie came out that year.
Right.
That I didn't feel they didn't feel like good enough to be on the list, but I did enjoy them a lot, and I do like those are more rewatchable for me.
Yeah. Very cool. Anything else you want to add to the honorable mentions list?
I mean, I could go on for a long time on them, but I kind of Panic Room was another one.
Uh-huh.
But I kind of want to hear what yours are. Have any of them lined up so far?
Well, yeah. Some of those are on my list, so I don't want to,
Oh, okay.
until I get to those lists, I'll talk about them then. But yeah,
Okay.
Punch Drunk Love. I remember it being my first Paul Thomas Anderson film I saw in theaters, and wasn't what I was expecting, but I was very pleasantly surprised. Attack of the Clones. I don't think it's the worst prequel movie. So I already said Punch Drunk Love. Insomnia, which is the first
Oh, yeah.
studio Christopher Nolan film after his the buzz off of Memento, which is on my list of 2001. Great little great ensemble cast there: Al Pacino, Hilary Swank, Robin Williams. Another 1 hour photo, another like creepy Robin Williams bid here. Have you seen this episode of Family Guy where whatever Peter touches turns to Robin Williams? And then
No.
Stewie's like, oh hey, there's the sad old bearded Robin Williams, and then they forgot to mention the creepy Robin Williams from like Insomnia and 1 hour photo. But it just shows that he has such
I
great
agree.
range.
Those are both worth shout outs. I should have mentioned those too.
Uh-huh.
Because Insomnia and 1 hour photo are both kind of forgotten movies that I don't think should be.
Yeah.
This was a time where Robin Williams was trying to do more dramatic roles, and the audience wasn't all that forgiving about it. They wanted to see him do comedy like he was so good at. And it's not like he was bad, but it was just like Jim Carrey when he tried to do drama. It wasn't bad, but those movies weren't that successful because, audiences didn't want to see him be serious. They wanted to see him be funny. And there's kind of the same with Robin Williams. Robin Williams had a little more grace with the audience than Jim Carrey did. Like Jim Carrey's movies, the dramas flopped, or they tended to flop.
Mm-hmm.
And Robin Williams, he got acclaim and stuff. But yeah, these were good. And I think Insomnia is more just forgotten because Chris Nolan became Chris Nolan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
I mean, it got him the gig with Batman Begins, so that was a great jumping off point. I think it's a little bit flawed. It's a remake, and is one of the films.
I didn't see the original either.
Yeah, I watched it. It's with Stellan Skarsgård. is pretty good, but it was one of the films that I rewatched, and I remember liking it a lot, but not as it's gonna be muddled there with all of all the other great Christopher Nolan films. But it's like you said, it shouldn't be forgotten, but it is. 1 hour photo, I don't think I've seen this since it came out in theaters, and I remember not remembering too much about it. Just remember, him working at a 1 hour photo store in like a Walmart kind of thing. It was
Yeah.
directed by Mark Romanek, like featured music video director. I remember like him and like Spike Jones and Michel Gondry were like huge,
Yeah.
like respected music video directors. They had like a DVD with all their works come out. So I'm kind of sad to see he didn't like take off in the feature film biz, but I really like this film. He wrote and directed it. And have you seen this film, Chris? 1 hour photo.
1 hour. Yeah. Yeah. I saw it. I think twice,
Okay.
but both times it was like back then, like
Yeah,
close to when it came
yeah.
out, because I think I rented it.
Right. Yeah, I forgot what
Um,
happened, and so I was like, seeing it again. It's a great character piece, and then the reveal at the end. I won't reveal what it is, but it's a very, it works, and
yeah.
it doesn't cheat, and it makes sense for his character, and
Yeah. I would like to rewatch that movie.
yeah. I'm not gonna spoil it for you, so watch it and let me know what you think. You said The Bourne Identity. I love Doug Liman. I love Swingers and Go. So to see him veer off in this other genre and do bigger movies, he did like Mr. and Mrs. Smith after this. So great career for him, Doug Liman. That is. Solaris. I'm a
Yeah.
huge Soderbergh fan, and he did Full Frontal
Oh,
this year.
interesting.
And Ocean's 11 was on my list, top 10 list last year. So Soderbergh is a great, like, he never makes the same movie twice, and he always does like a studio picture, and then he'll do like a very pretentious like art house film. So he's like he does everything, and I love his sensibility. Um, Full Frontal, not really up my alley. It's a little too experimental, but Solaris, the remake of the I believe the Russian film,
Yeah.
was like little less, you know, it wasn't as long. It was like an hour and a half, so probably he's trying to make it more accessible, I guess. The good,
Yeah. Yeah. And it. I mean, I wasn't big on Solaris, and I actually saw that movie fairly recently.
the original or
Um,
the Soderbergh?
No, the new one.
Okay,
Um, I have seen the original one by Tarkovsky,
yeah,
Andrei Tarkovsky, and that one, I, I don't see myself getting into his movies.
oh yeah,
Because I heard like Solaris was one of his more accessible films,
oh geez,
and that movie was so bizarre.
yeah.
I didn't,
You got to be in the mood for that.
Yeah, and I don't see myself ever being in the mood for
Right.
something like that. But I know his other movies, which are regarded as classics, are even more abstract and
Sure,
weird,
sure.
and and I don't know if I could go for that. It would have to be some sort of event that I'm attending.
Absolutely, fair point. Cool. I have a couple more. The Good Girl. I just remember being a huge Mike White fan. I still am. He
Yeah.
wrote The White Orchid for HBO, so he's still working and still doing a lot of very challenging work. So I really recommend. And he does commercial fare. He wrote School of Rock and starred in it. So he's a very very interesting writer. I don't know if he's directed. Possession. It's not the demonic possession that you're thinking of. It's like the romantic kind of sexual possession. I'm a huge
Yeah.
Neil LaBute fan. He's a playwright, and
Yeah,
I love like
absolutely.
in the Company of Men and The Shape of Things and
Yeah.
Your Friends and Neighbors. So I was a huge LaBute fan back in the day. Aaron Eckhart and Gwyneth Paltrow, I believe, were in it. Rules of Attraction. I remember. Not a huge fan of Roger Avery. I know he co-wrote. He has a story credit for Pulp Fiction, and he's
Yeah.
a close friend of Tarantino. But I remember watching it just because I was a huge Dawson's Creek fan, and love James Van Der Beek, and just to see him play outside of his type, like play like a bad boy and a drug dealer. So it was kind of cool to see that. Um, Red Dragon, the Brett Ratner
Yeah.
adaptation of the Thomas Harris. He was huge on Hannibal, and if you guys listen to the Laserboy before, you guys know I'm a huge Hannibal, the TV series fan. So just
Yeah.
watching
That was a
this.
great show.
Oh, you seen it?
Oh yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I'm very into that genre. In
Oh,
fact,
that's
I
great.
have a script that's kind of similar to that kind of a movie.
Oh, very awesome. Um, Watching it now, I've read the Thomas Harris books, and every time I read them, I mentioned this in the last podcast when I was talking about Hannibal, the Ridley Scott film from 2001. But every time I watch, as great as Sir Anthony Hopkins is, and he's always going to be defined as Hannibal Lecter. Whenever I read a Thomas Harris novel with Hannibal Lecter in it, I see Mads Mikkelsen. He's just a much better, more charming version of Hannibal Lecter, in my opinion. But not to take anything away from Anthony Hopkins. Um,
Well, I'll admit that I've never read the books, so all I have to go on are the movies.
and the TV show.
Yeah, and the show.
Yeah.
What did you think of Brian Cox and Manhunter?
Oh, I haven't seen it enough times, but I feel like it's a more understated performance, more subtle performance. So
Yeah, it absolutely is.
yeah.
But as someone who's read the book, I was just curious, like
Yeah.
how close he was.
Well, Manhunter. Probably not that close. He probably took a lot of liberties. Because it was probably one of the first adaptations of the novel.
Right.
So Red Dragon is a much more faithful adaptation. And if you watch the last half of the third season of Hannibal, a lot of those beats are mirrored from this film. Like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
both
Absolutely.
of those adaptations are very close adaptations, in my opinion. And I forgot how close this film was to the novel. And Joseph Fiennes is a very creepy tooth fairy. Francis Dollarhide.
Rafe Fiennes.
Ray Fiennes? Oh yeah, sorry, yeah,
Yeah.
Ray Fiennes. You're right. Yeah, thank you for the correction. Edward
But
Norton.
I love Red Dragon. It's actually on my list, so I'll talk more
Okay,
about it
nice,
later.
nice.
But yeah, I do love that movie.
Edward Norton to me, he's a fine actor. I just don't see him as Will Graham. That's all I'll say about that. I loved Philip Seymour Hoffman as Freddie Lowndes,
He's great.
and again, I love Ray Fiennes
He's
as
great in everything.
oh my god, yes, rest in peace.
He was great in Punch Drunk Love.
Right. And another film on my list, but I'll get to that when I get to that. Okay, I've talked enough about Red Dragon.
Yeah, it might be the same film because I think I have another one too.
Okay. But yeah, Red Dragon. I can't believe like all the story beats hit on that, and like it's almost like IP. Like oh, it's such a familiar story that like that they readapt all the time, and then similarly, the next film I'm going to mention, Dahmer, 2002 with Jeremy Renner. It's funny because I just finished watching the Netflix series, the Dahmer Netflix
Oh yeah,
series by Ryan Murphy. Have you seen that, Chris?
not yet. Is it good?
It's intense. Like,
Hmm.
don't binge it unless I know you're into that genre, so maybe you can. But it is heavy. It's like I had to stop it after every episode and just kind of soak it in. I can't binge that show, especially the first like 6 episodes. They're one of the episodes is heartbreaking and it's just gut wrenching, and there's nothing like it on like close to Mindhunter. There's nothing that intense about serial killers out there, and I know it's getting a lot of flack for re-traumatizing all the
Yeah.
living victims' families right now. Minor spoilers for the show. You don't have to listen to this, Chris. I'm not going to completely spoil it. Don't worry. But I do love the way that the show that they do pay homage and they show the kind of the fallout of what happens to all of the victims. So they don't. It's not like they gloss over what happens to the victim's family. They do show what happens to them and pay tribute to them. So in that sense, I think people who are complaining haven't seen the series the whole way through. Because they do pay respects to them. But it's getting a lot of buzz right now. So it's but yeah, going back to the film Dahmer, Jeremy Renner, a young Jeremy Renner, right? Before he
Yeah.
broke out as Hawkeye and Born Legacy, but he's a great actor. I can't believe like
Yeah.
he disappeared in this role. Um, Ditto, Red Dragon, how it kind of covers all these story beats that are familiar, like about what happened. I feel like Dahmer, though, the film 2002 Dahmer, kind of glosses over a lot of things because it has to cram everything out into an hour and 40-minute film, and
Yeah.
because of that, it kind of shows him as like like an anti-hero, you know? Like we don't see the consequences of what happens. It's just him. He kind of almost gets away with it. There's like an ending scroll that shows tells us what happens to him, but the last shot of is him just kind of walking away, disappearing into a forest, and it's like, all right, I guess we're kind of, I don't know what the word is. He's almost like an anti-hero. It's like, yeah. So if people have something to complain about that movie because it's not showing, you know,
Yeah,
the causality at all of his actions. So, but that's a fascinating film. You haven't seen that film, Chris?
No, and I think I have a hard time a little bit with same reason why this new show is kind of traumatizing people. I have a little bit of a problem with how they dramatize
serial killers,
real killings that happen.
Right.
Like I'm okay with stuff like Jack the Ripper because that happened so long ago.
I see.
Even the Ed Gein stuff was kind of a long time ago. But like recent history like that, I guess I'm a little apprehensive about how tastefully it's done.
Sure.
I saw the movie where Zac Efron played Ted Bundy.
Yeah.
And I felt that they kind of went out of their way to make him too likable. For like they didn't spend enough time focusing on like the actual harm he caused.
Yeah.
And like if I were to tell a story like that would be my main focus is how can I tell the story and not offend the actual victims and victims' families of these like horrific crimes.
Yeah.
Because it's not gentle subject matter, and I know a lot of people nowadays are into true crime and all sorts of that kind of stuff. And it's one thing when you're making a documentary about it, but it's another to kind of dramatize these events and almost glorify the actions in a way.
Yeah.
Like the reason why Dahmer got made is because Dahmer himself is a name, and they use that as like, oh, we can make money off this kind of a thing.
Yeah. Well, I completely agree with you, Chris, and I feel like the filmmakers. First of all, I respect Ryan Murphy, and a lot of the directors of these episodes. Paris Barclay is an openly gay man. Jennifer Lynch, female perspective there. So, and they do actually address that issue of how people kind of idolized him at the end, like writing him letters, and how wrong that was, and how the victims of the family fought against that, and sued the city and sued the police department, and how the police department was very biased towards white males, of course, and so they address all those things. So it's not like they were insensitive about that, So unlike the film Dahmer, which was made in 2002, so I don't think they took the time to address all those things. So we're into 2022 now, so I believe all those issues that you have, they address those in the show. Sorry, but
fair enough. And like I give the filmmakers the benefit of the doubt. Like I know they're not trying to hurt people or anything like that. And I'm not boycotting these movies either. It's not like I'll never watch it. I'm just saying I'm a little dubious. And if they get enough interest, and I hear enough good things, and then I'll get to it. But because Mindhunter is another one that was really good, but
it was about real serial killers.
But it didn't follow the killers. It wasn't like they weren't the heroes of the story.
Well,
that's okay.
Dahmer, there's like 5 episodes that follow his backstory, and then the other half follow the perspective of the victim. So, but one more thing about Dahmer,
I know Ryan Murphy thing to do.
Right, yeah. One more thing I wanted to talk about was, I know I talk about this too long, but people, I hear people's complaints, and I hear them, and I don't agree that you should attack the filmmakers though, because they're just like you said, true crime is trending right now. Dahmer's a household name. They're just working on what will sell, They handled it tastefully, thank goodness. But if you want to blame somebody, blame the culture, because the culture is what's making these subject matters trending and and popular, and if people watch it and if people demand for it enough, they're gonna keep making them. You know what I mean? Um,
Yeah.
I feel like the same thing with like the adult film industry. As long as there's a demand for it, but people like it. People like serial killer films and true crime films because it's something that they would never do. Hopefully, right? Just like
Yeah.
something like BDSM or something. It's like a fantasy thing that you would never do in real life. That's why we're so turned on by it, right? So it's embedded in our culture. That's all I wanted to say about that. And until
Yeah.
the culture changes, that's when our content will change. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and again, like I'm into that stuff too, so I'm not like against that either.
Sure,
It's
sure.
just I go in hoping that they at least handled it tastefully, and I'm afraid of watching it if they don't.
Yeah.
'Cause
You know
then I
what?
feel a little gross.
The first episode is pretty rough. It's pretty dark and intense. So please don't judge it by that. But
Yeah,
I'd love to hear your
and
thoughts, though.
I never would. I mean,
Yeah.
because I would see it through to the end because I would assume that that's they're going somewhere with it.
Yeah. Okay, let me do some more real quick. Autofocus by Paul Schrader, one of my favorite filmmakers and writers. He wrote like Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, Gangs of New York by Martin Scorsese. Lesser Scorsese work, but I still was a huge fan of Bill the Butcher, Daniel Day Lewis, and Leonardo DiCaprio. You mentioned
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers. I love the big battle at the end, but I'm not a huge Lord of the Rings fan. So, but it's still an honorable mention just because such a different genre.
Yeah.
Narc by Joe Carnahan with Ray Liotta and that other dude. I forgot his name. Bowling for Columbine. I mentioned before.
Jason Patrick. Right?
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
He's forgotten, but man, he's
Yeah.
such an intense actor. Jesus. And a movie I just saw like a couple days ago, Catch Me If You Can. I don't
Yeah.
watch this movie enough. I don't know why. Probably because I didn't understand like the adult themes and like his fraud, and I didn't understand all that stuff. So I was like, it didn't impress me. But now just to watch it and him and Tom Hanks, and it's so much fun. I love it so much.
Yeah. Some of those movies are on my list, so I'll talk more about those.
Okay, cool. So that concludes our honorable mentions section. Let's get right into our top films of 2002, and we're gonna both list off our from 10 to 1. So you mentioned your 10, I'll mention my 10, and so on and so
Okay.
forth. Does that sound good?
Sure.
Welcome to Miami Mutual Bank. How may I help you?
I'd like to cash this check here, and then I'd like to take you out for a steak dinner.
Chris, what's your number 10?
My number 10 is Spider-Man,
Hmm.
Sam Raimi. And I think that's an underrated movie that kind of revived the superhero genre. You could argue Blade did, because Blade is a comic book movie, and by the way, Blade 2 came out in 2002 as well.
Yep, it's on my list.
I was not a huge fan of those movies.
Okay.
They kind of deserve a rewatch, but like, to me, I'm more of a horror guy and less of an action guy. And so when you make
Blade 2? Blade is not horror?
I consider those movies more action movies than horror movies.
Blade 2 is very horror.
Yeah, I mean, I still
Driven.
consider them action movies. I never found them particularly scary, but that's, of course, my own opinion on it. And again, like, they do deserve a rewatch. I haven't seen them. I've only seen them once. Actually, I don't even think I saw Blade Trinity.
Yeah.
But I've only seen the movies once, and they probably deserve a rewatch with a more advanced brain that I have now.
Right.
Back then, especially when those movies came out, I hadn't even gone to film school yet, so I had a limited knowledge of movies. I mean, I knew a lot about movies, but not older than 15 years old or something like that. I mean, I watched the Bond movie, so like pre-1960, I didn't see much of anything. So, but now that I've watched so much more, it would be interesting with that context to go in and watch those movies again and see how I can appreciate it for what it is. So the truth is I just need to rewatch the Blade movies because I hear nothing but good things about them. So like I don't like to I don't want to bag on them.
No.
And by the way, I never thought they were bad.
No, and you're on the right track. That Blade Trinity is you should never watch that. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, the only reason I would have is because Ryan Reynolds. Yes. But Spider-Man was, I think one of the top 3 heroes as far as popularity goes. There's Batman, Superman, and Spider-Man. I think those are the top 3. I don't know. I mean, it might have changed a little bit now with all the Marvel movies that came out, but certainly at that time, I think those were the most popular superheroes. And Spider-Man, I think, changed the game. I thought Sam Raimi did a great job. I think he mastered the tone of like what Marvel became after that. I think the Marvel movies were influenced either directly or indirectly. I have no knowledge of that, but I think they were influenced by the tone of the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans. I think they were like, that's what we want to emulate because they have sense of humor in it. They're not too dark, and they have legit actors in it. And that was kind of the basis for what all those Marvel movies later on came to be, starting with Iron Man. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I really enjoyed that movie, but yeah, that's my number 10.
All right, yeah, that was Spider-Man number 10. Chris is number 10. It's on my honorable mentions, and I gotta agree with you. It did kickstart, like, definitively the superhero genre. For me, Blade, as much as I love Blade 1 and 2, I feel like Blade is more of like the beta testing. It was like testing the waters of would this be a viable, genre for the masses, and the answer is yes. And then Spider-Man came out and blew everything out of the water, and it became a full-blown genre in and of itself, like a Western. Yeah. It's a superhero genre now. So very culturally relevant film there. Thank you for sharing that, Chris. My number 10. Yeah, my number 10 is Hero, one of my 3 foreign films on the list by Zhang Yimou. I'm a huge fan of wuxia films, and of Zhang Yimou in particular. I love Judo. I love all the films he made with Gong Li. And I don't think she's in this. No, she's not. It's Jet Li, Maggie Cheung, Donnie Yen. Did I say? Oh, and then Tony Leung. So 4 like megastars from Hong Kong, from Chinese cinema, and directed by one of the biggest directors in from China. So, and this didn't come out in the States until 2004 when Tarantino championed it and raved about it. And I love it, man. It's just a great classic wuxia tale, great action, and it's done with such precision storytelling and precision just production. The production design to all the wire stunts are just top notch, and it kind of jump started Western fascination with the wuxia. I mean, Zhang Yimou made House of Flying Daggers after that, and then subsequently made Curse of the Golden Flower with Gong Li and Chow Yun Fat. So yeah, he kind of revived the genre for Western audiences here, and it's no joke. He made it. He made it like an A-list genre. Back then it was, with all the what's that studio that Tarantino loves, the Shaw Brothers studio. Back then it was just pretty much like B movies, right? So he kind of made it into a respected genre, and I love it. Have you seen Hero, Chris?
I have not seen it. I will check it out now.
So cool. That was my number 10, Hero by Zhang Yimou. What's your number 9, Chris?
My number 9 is Road to Perdition. Tom Hanks.
I wanted to put it on my honorable mentions, but I've never seen it. But maybe it's really? A film I have to see now.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, this is Sam Mendes film.
Yes.
Who's a great director.
Mm-hmm.
Tom Hanks is one of my favorite actors, so I will watch anything he does, and I have. The only thing I haven't seen yet is the new Elvis movie.
Okay.
But I've seen everything. I even saw the new Pinocchio one.
Mm-hmm.
But like anything Tom Hanks does, and then of course Paul Newman is in the movie, classes it up.
Oh, geez.
Pre-James Bond, Daniel Craig
Wow.
is in it.
Okay. Now I have
Jude
to see
Law,
this.
Stanley Tucci. So it's a gangster film,
Uh-huh.
a crime movie, and the only one where you could argue that Tom Hanks plays a bad guy.
Wow. Okay.
Because he's a gangster in it. I mean, he's not really a bad guy because he's like an anti-hero.
Yeah, he's a gangster with a
trying
heart
to
of
get out
gold.
of the crime game because he's afraid that his young son, played by Tyler Hoechlin, who's also a baseball player, by the way.
Oh, wow.
And now he's Superman. He's
There
on
you
that
go.
Superman and Lois show.
Oh, nice.
But he's trying to get out of the crime game because he's afraid that his son is going to get caught up in it, and he wants a better life for his son. So it's kind of a sweet story. And Paul Newman is this mobster that Hanks works for. It's gripping. It's Tom Hanks like you've never seen him before, and I think that in itself is worth a watch. And he gives a great performance in a surprising performance given like his body of work prior to that point. And he still hasn't really gone back to that like dark, shadowy character kind of work, and I would love for him to do that.
He kind of does with Elvis. So
yeah, I know he's kind of like a slime ball in that because I know who he plays, the real life guy.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not the same as like, Road to Perdition is actually like he's a mobster. He's like a villain pretty much.
Gotcha.
But he has enough of a heart to care about his son and stuff like that. But anyway, it's worth watching if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, very cool. You've definitely piqued my interest. The cast alone makes me like need to watch that. So thank you so much for that winning endorsements.
Jennifer Jason Leigh is in it too.
Yeah. Who?
Jennifer Jason Leigh.
Oh, okay. Wow. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a great cast.
Yeah, I'm a huge Sam Mendes fan from ever since American Beauty, and I loved all of his Bond films, Skyfall and Spectre. So love his work. Thank you for putting that on your list. I got to check it out now.
Yeah.
That was number 9, Road to Perdition. That was Chris's number 9. My number 9, in the same vein of you mentioned Spider-Man, my number 9 is Blade 2. I really wanted to put Spider-Man in here, but you guys know from our past episodes, me and my friend Steven talk about Spider-Man to death. We did a podcast on all of the Spider-Man movies before No Way Home came out. So I didn't want to talk about it anymore because I'm a little talked out of Spider-Man there. So thank you for putting it on your list. But Blade...
Well, what's your... Because I don't know, maybe you covered it on that show or maybe you didn't, but what is your favorite Spider-Man movie of all?
It's got to be Spider-Man 2 because it's such a classic, tale, and I love how like adult it feels, like the writing, him like struggling with like he loses his powers because he has like he's like repressing this this really complicated emotion called love, and I just the movie's just perfect. Blade 2, I feel like it's a great genre piece. Guillermo del Toro's a great horror director, and again, we're talking about villains. The villain in this film is so creepy. It's like it's a cross between like a vampire and like a face hugger. He has like this weird like leechy succubus thing that comes out of his mouth, and it's the design of that is just incredible. But such a menacing villain, and a superhero movie is as strong as what your villain is, right? So great, cool cast here. Of course, you got Wesley Snipes and Ron Perlman. You got Donnie Yen, one of my favorite martial artists. It's a really fun film. It feels like it's sequels have a lot of freedom to just you don't have to tell an origin story anymore, so you're free to break off and do your own thing, and it's one of those films. Norman Reedus is in here. Oh, I'm just reading his cast list here. Chris Christopherson, So yeah, Blade 2 is probably the best Blade film. Not that's not saying much, but I put Blade.
That's what I hear.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot of people say that, and again, it's worth me revisiting.
Right, right. I think Blade is a good installment as well. I love Stephen Dorff's character, and I love the introduction of it, and it just feels like a weird. It doesn't feel like a superhero movie, you know. It just feels like an R-rated, like action movie, you know. So, in that sense, it's very kind of experimental in terms of being in the superhero genre. But again, it was when the genre was relatively new. So that's my number 9, Blade 2. Chris, what is your number 8 film?
So my number 8, we mentioned earlier, is Gangs of New York. To me, it is a rewatchable film.
Okay.
And I have the Blu-ray, and it's one of the few films where, you know, Leonardo DiCaprio is the second best actor in it.
Right.
You know, because Daniel Day-Lewis gives, you know, one of the greatest performances ever put to film in that movie is Bill the Butcher.
He won the Oscar for that year, didn't he?
Yeah.
No?
He did not. He's won 3 Oscars. My Left Foot, There Will Be Blood, and Lincoln.
Oh,
but he was nominated for it.
Okay.
And he was great in it.
Yes.
And DiCaprio was great in it. Cameron Diaz was good in it. Liam Neeson, Brendan Gleeson, John C. Reilly.
Oh wow.
It's a fantastic cast. And of course it's Scorsese. And apparently there was a story of George Lucas visiting the set. You know, and you know they have the whole what was it called? The five points or whatever.
Yeah.
In the movie, and they built that whole set, and apparently, you know, Scorsese's walking Lucas around, and Lucas looks around at the big set, and he goes, you know, you can do this all on computers now. Which is kind of funny. Just you know, he was in the middle of the sequel.
Sure.
Yeah. Which were all blue screen.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
But yeah, Gangs of New York, I think, is a movie that was. It's like a crime film, like Scorsese does well, but a period crime film.
Yeah,
which made it kind of an interesting twist, and it's still New York. It's not a movie that I traditionally would gravitate towards. In fact, a lot of Scorsese movies, I would argue, are kind of like that. Not my cup of tea, but it still was enthralling to me. I felt like, you know, I think what made me gravitate toward this movie was the performances. A lot of great actors in that movie at the top of their game. And Daniel Day-Lewis and Leo are in every scene, essentially, and like they're captivating. You can't take your eyes off them. So I think that's why I like it so much. I understand how some people wouldn't like it, but to me, as an actor, the performances are just very inspiring, and you know, it's, you know, when you see, you know, actors do great work like that, you kind of feel pumped up and motivated, like, yeah, so next time that I go out on audition or something like that, or next movie that I do, I'm gonna just go all in, you know, kind of a thing. And this is one of those movies.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mentioned it earlier in my honorable mentions, and I said it was a lesser Martin Scorsese film. I didn't mean to belittle your appreciation for the film at all. I just meant in the context of his entire filmography. It's a film that I revisit the least in his filmography, because he has so many great films, you know. Okay, cool. So that was your number 8, Gangs in New York. My number 8 is, I believe it was on your honorable mentions, Panic Room, the David Fincher film. Yeah. To me, probably a lesser David Fincher work. Again, he has not that wide of a body of work, but he's just so specific, and he has such great films.
Same with Scorsese. It's like, well, you know, you could say lesser David Fincher. Just like Insomnia would be lesser Chris Nolan. But
exactly, but it's still great, you know.
Awesome.
I feel like it's one of the movies that I rewatched. I haven't seen it in a while, and I just remember I only watch it maybe when I do like a David Fincher retrospective, and it's almost like one of those films that's like a requirement. You know, it's like, oh, I gotta watch this one, and I gotta watch The Game. I love The Game, and I gotta watch Benjamin Button, but watching it now, I feel like it's a lost art, a lost genre in cinematic, like theatrical storytelling. It's essentially like, what do you call it, like a bottle episode, where it just
Yeah.
takes place in one location. Where, a bottle episode is the episode in TV where they have to
They save money.
they save money and they have to just use one location, right? But I feel like
Yeah.
this kind of high concept thriller is a lost art because it's not very theatrical. It's just people in a room talking, but there's tension ratcheting, there's suspense that grows, and this is more of a genre that's, it's going to go straight to Netflix these days. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it just goes to show you it's a movie of a bygone era, and but it's great to see on a big screen. I have a 100-inch projector screen, so watching it, I watch the open mat format, so it's the edition where they show on like HBO, where it's not meant to be seen that way because it's 235. It's more of a letterbox format, but I saw like more picture in this version, and it felt a little bit more claustrophobic, if that makes any sense. You know what I mean? It's weird that
Yeah, sure.
you see more picture, but it feels more claustrophobic. You know what I mean? Great
Panic
performances.
Room is also like the pinnacle movie that you go to when you talk about home invasion thrillers.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, when you say home invasion thriller, like the first thing that you think of is Panic Room.
Uh-huh.
And it has Jodie Foster, who's always great.
Uh-huh.
It has a young Jared Leto.
Young Kristen
Like,
Stewart.
Before Jared Leto was like... By the way, Jared Leto, another movie that I kind of forgot to mention in the honorable mentions, he did a movie called Highway, which came out in 2002.
Okay, very cool.
With Jake Gyllenhaal and Selma Blair. My friend Derek, it's his favorite movie of all time. There's also John C. McGinley and Jeremy Piven are in it as
Okay,
well.
nice.
So it's got a good cast. It's very offbeat and quirky.
Very cool.
Highway. But yeah, Highway,
Okay.
and Jared Leto was like the lead of that.
Oh,
But
nice.
he generally does. At that time, he was doing a lot of indie movies. And then he worked with Fincher on Fight Club, and then
Right,
Panic
yeah,
Room
yeah,
and
yeah,
stuff,
yeah.
where he played kind of supporting roles, almost forgettable roles.
Yeah, but he has a great role in
but-
this one. He plays like this like crack addict, criminal, and he's the I can't think of the word, but the loose cannon. I want to say,
Yeah.
not really, but the ace in the hole, not the ace in the hole. I'm getting all my euphemisms mixed up here, but I love like that dynamic of the three criminals, right? They're just like at
Right.
each other's throats. You don't know what Raul's up to. He's like just the wild card, right? And obviously Forrest Whitaker's like the good criminal. He doesn't want to hurt anyone. And then just like the dynamic of them arguing all the time is just so fascinating. Great character work by David Koepp. He's a great he's like the go-to
Yeah.
thriller writer. He wrote like Jurassic Park, and I don't know if he
Yeah.
wrote that movie Cellular, but that's another kind of high concept thriller that deals with like a
Yeah.
chase or like suspense kind of thriller.
Kim Basinger.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
And Chris Evans, I believe, is in that too. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's weird. I don't know what happened to David Fincher after that. He took like a 5-year break. I know he doesn't struggle, but he really likes to choose his movies carefully. He did Zodiac in 2007, so he took a long break after that. I don't know what the story is behind that, but I highly recommend.
Well, I know he got disillusioned for a while. I
Oh,
know.
really? Okay.
But he's also very selective of his films.
Yeah. Very cool. So that was Panic Room. That was my number 8. Let's get into your number 7, Chris.
So my number 7 was Interstate 60. Have you heard of it?
No.
The full title is Interstate 60: Episodes of the Road. Now, movie was written and directed by Bob Gale, who was the co-writer of Back to the Future.
Oh, okay.
And it's an indie movie. Not a lot of people know about it, but it's got a stacked cast. The lead is James Marsden.
Oh.
The second lead is Gary Oldman. And then they have a bunch of cameos from Christopher Lloyd, Michael J. Fox, Amy Jo Johnson, who's the Pink Ranger, Kurt Russell, Chris Cooper, Anne Margaret, and Amy Smart is in it.
Mm.
And it's just a wonderful, like, offbeat, quirky movie that not a lot of people have seen, and I think I'm trying to figure out how I saw it.
Yeah.
Because I don't remember how I got my hands on it, but I remember I bought the DVD, and I still have it. Still nobody talks about it, but it's about a guy that goes on a road trip on Highway I-60, which doesn't exist in real life. This is, and it kind of, and they talk about that in the movie too. Like, this isn't a real highway, but Gary Oldman plays this like angel kind of character who's taking James Marsden on this like journey of self-discovery, and they go on this like mythical road trip through I-60, and he's searching for answers basically, and I don't really want to go too far into it because there's a lot of it's a movie that's hard to explain without spoiling it, because a lot of things just happen, but it's very funny, and it's very poignant, and the performances are also amazing, because all the actors that are in it. But I would highly recommend checking that one out.
Wow, that's awesome. I didn't think we'd have a movie on our list that I never heard of, but it's so cool.
Yeah. I mean, like when I found out that it came out in 2002, because I thought it was 2003 for some reason, but when I found out it came out in 2002, I was excited to add it on here because I wanted people to watch it, because it has a great cast.
Yeah.
And most people are probably kicking themselves for not even having heard of it.
So,
and it's funny too, because like Bob Gale wrote Back to the Future,
right?
And I believe this is his only movie that he ever directed.
And it was independently financed, you said?
I don't know if it was independently financed,
Okay.
But it might have been, because I know Zemeckis was a producer on it.
Yeah.
So Zemeckis actually maybe. I'm not sure if Zemeckis was a producer on it.
Yeah.
He got some sort of credit. Maybe it was a special thanks or something. But yeah, I mean, like Bob Gale with his Back to the Future money might have financed it. I don't know how it was financed, but it was independently made. And yeah, it was fairly low budget. And it was a road trip movie with James Marsden and Gary Oldman, in a car basically.
Right.
And Gary Oldman gives a typical Gary Oldman great performance. I was mentioning Michael Keaton as my favorite actor. Gary Oldman would be my other favorite actor.
Yeah.
And him I love just because I think he's like the best there is. It doesn't like his range and his commitment is just unparalleled. Except for maybe like there's like Daniel Day-Lewis, and there's Meryl Streep, and there's Gary Oldman, and like these are actors that are kind of in a class of their own. You might be able to add like Anthony Hopkins or something like that. But Gary Oldman gives like a wonderfully like offbeat performance in it that you don't typically think of Gary Oldman giving. But you can say that about a lot of Gary Oldman movies, I guess, because he does a lot of different kinds of roles.
Yeah.
But this one, he's playing like a wizard kind of character, and I don't mean like Gandalf wizard, but like the magical, like I'm going to show you the way kind of a thing.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And he has this fun little accent in it, because he does a different accent in like every movie. And James Marsden, who I think is a very underrated actor, gives a lead performance in it, which I think is really awesome. And I think he doesn't get the credit he deserves, because he's in a lot of movies, but most of them he's not the lead in. There's another movie from 2006 called 10th and Wolf, which is like a drama kind of low budget gangster crime movie, and he was kind of the lead in that. But he's a really underrated actor, and this movie really shows him off, but not a lot of people saw it.
Okay. So that's Highway 65, you said?
Interstate 60.
Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry. Interstate 60.
Yeah.
You had another movie called Highway in your list, right?
Highway was on my honorable mention.
Honorable
that was
mention,
the one with
okay.
Jared Leto, Jake Gyllenhaal, and Selma Blair.
That's right. Okay, cool. So that was your number 7. Thank you for mentioning that. That's definitely something I'll have to check out. All right, cool. My number 7 is also a different kind of film. It's an indie film by a filmmaker called Todd Solondz. The film is called Storytelling. Have you seen this film, Chris?
No, I haven't.
Starring... It's essentially 2 films structured... the first half is called Fiction, and the second half of the film is called Nonfiction. And the fiction half stars Selma Blair, Leo Fitzpatrick, that dude from The Wire, I forget his name, I'm sorry, no disrespect intended. And it's about creative writers. So there's like sitting around in a class. I'm sure you and I are very familiar with that locale, that background, that setting, and critique each other. Critique each other's short stories, pretty much. And then the second half is about a documentary filmmaker played by Paul Giamatti, and he's making a documentary about the effects of how kids are post Columbine. So how kind of not disenfranchised, but what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of disconnected, alienated they are from kind of reality and culture, right? So
Yeah.
there's a great line in the film where Scooby, played by I want to look it up, but I don't want to. But that guy who's in Scott Pilgrim, like the other lead guitarist.
Man, there were a lot of people in Scott Pilgrim.
Right. So he's asking permission for he used to go to the school at this high school. He's asking permission so he could film there, and he's using the restroom. Paul Giamatti, he's the filmmaker, and he's using the restroom, and it's during class time. Nobody's in the bathroom, and except for Scooby, who is smoking weed in the bathroom. And then he sees him in there, and he says, "What are you, some kind of pervert?" He asks Paul Giamatti, right? And then Paul Giamatti says, "No, I'm a documentary filmmaker." It's such a great deadpan kind of humor. I love that kind of humor. My favorite film of 2001 was Ghost World, so I'm really into kind of the dark underground comic sensibility of filmmakers like Todd Solondz. So you don't see that enough of that, So he made, I don't know if you've seen his films, but he made Welcome to the Dollhouse, Happiness with Philip Seymour Hoffman's in that, and recently he tried to go a little bit more mainstream. He made Dark Horse with Christopher Walken, and then Wiener Dog. It's kind of like an anthology film series centered around Dachshund Wiener Dog, who has multiple owners. One of the sections in that film was really great about Danny DeVito. He plays like a screenwriting professor. So it's a great film.
I have not seen any of those. I've heard of them.
Okay, you should definitely check out Storytelling, because you'll definitely be in on the joke of, especially the writers' room, the circle of creative writers, how they're all just kind of shitting on each other and criticizing, and they're just how that. I'm pretty sure it wasn't like that in our classes, but there was one or two students who would just thought the world of their writing, right, and would shit on everyone else's work, and then the nonfiction section, because you're a filmmaker, and you definitely know how the struggle it is of creating a film. So it's a very great dichotomy of fiction and nonfiction, and it's such a different film. Again, that movie would go straight to streaming these days. Indie films usually do well. They have a short shelf life in theaters. If it's like A24 or Annapurna or something like that. But again, it's a bygone era, right? These kind of films.
Yeah. I mean, I remember I haven't seen any of them, but I know them. When you said the titles, I know the posters.
Uh-huh.
I remember Welcome to the Dollhouse was the one that was written in like cut out magazine letters kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
And then Happiness was it was like a cartoon poster, right?
Yeah.
You know, where they were all animated on it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and those, you know, I would have been interested in watching them, you know, when I was starting as an actor and like, you know, trying to watch all these like great kind of performance movies, and this looked indie and offbeat.
Yeah.
But I think I just hadn't heard enough about it to check them out, and like I was still trying to catch up on all these other movies.
Yeah.
So, but I'll definitely check them out, especially since I haven't seen any of his movies, Art Salons. Then I'll probably start watching them now.
Yeah, cool.
Just to see, because I feel like I'm missing out now.
Yeah, storytelling, I believe, is probably his most accessible, one of his most accessible work. And if you want to, you know, dive deeper into the rabbit hole, definitely check out Welcome to the Dollhouse. Have you seen Ghost World at all? He didn't do that, but it's...
I did see Ghost World, yeah.
Okay.
Steve Buscemi?
Yeah.
Birch?
Yes. And young ScarJo. Anyway, so that was my number 7, storytelling. Let's get into your number 6 film there, Chris.
So my number 6 is Spike Lee's 25th Hour.
Wow, that's my number 6 too.
Really?
I knew one of these films would have to cross over. I didn't know we'd both have it at the same spot.
Well, but it's the same number, so that's interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, because we talked about. I think you said you had another Philip Seymour Hoffman movie that was on your list.
Yeah.
And was this the one that you were talking about?
Yes, a Philip Seymour Hoffman film with Edward Norton. Yep.
Yeah, and we talked about Red Dragon.
Yeah.
We talked about Manhunter with Brian Cox. All of them are in this.
Yeah.
Rosario Dawson, Anna Paquin, and the
Barry Pepper.
Oh, Barry Pepper.
Yeah.
Barry Pepper. Yeah. And this. So I watched this movie when I was in acting class. My mentor compared me to Edward Norton. So I did it because he gave me a scene from Primal Fear, which is Edward Norton's first film, which is a great movie if you haven't seen it.
Okay.
It was his very first film. He got nominated for an Oscar. He played a person being charged with murder, you know, of a bishop, an archbishop, and he had a split personality. So Edward Norton plays like a split personality person, and he's great in it. And so I did a scene from that, and I got compared to him. And so I decided to do, because I had only seen at that point, I think I saw Red Dragon, and I saw Fight Club, and I saw, I think, Rounders.
Okay.
So, but those are the only movies that I'd seen. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go watch Edward Norton movies then, like if that's kind of my type. And so he became one of my favorite actors very quickly, because he does great work in everything. Even Red Dragon, I actually really liked him in that. But again, I haven't read the book, so you have that over me. You know, I just had the movie to go off of. But starting with Primal Fear, I'm like, this dude is amazing. And then American History X, he gives one of the greatest performances ever. You know, but anyway, I got to 25th Hour, and I'm like, this movie is fantastic. And it's kind of, it's very, it's one of Spike Lee's more, I don't want to say accessible, because it's not like they're inaccessible, but it's shot a little more mainstream Lee than his other movies are. And I like, I thought that it was, like, a lot of his movies are very heavy-handed, Spike Lee's. And this one, there's definitely an axe to grind in it, but it didn't feel as heavy-handed as the other ones. And it was, he gives a really intense monologue, Monty, in the movie.
The fuck you scene, right?
Yeah, in the mirror. And that, you know, that is kind of what sold me on the film. I think. I mean, I was liking it anyway, but that scene was like, okay, this movie is like something special, and nobody really talks about it anymore. But the performances are great across the board. There's another line too, champagne to my real friends and real pain to my sham friends, which I thought was kind of clever too. And it was also written by David Benioff, who went on to do Game of Thrones. So, but yeah, I thought the performances were terrific. I thought, in fact, I think this is my favorite Spike Lee film. And the only other one that I think rivals it for me would be Black Klansman. I like that one a lot. But I thought 25th Hour was great. Philip Seymour Hoffman is great in everything. And also, Philip Seymour Hoffman was in Red Dragon. And so, like, they did 2 movies together in the same year, which was kind of interesting. But I think that it's one of the films that cemented Edward Norton as like one of the greatest actors of this generation.
Yeah.
Because that performance is kind of on par with, you know, his performance in American History X. You know, it's tonally kind of similar. Maybe not as gritty and hard nosed as American History X was, but it's definitely dark and pointed, and you know, Rosario as his girlfriend and stuff gives a harrowing performance as well. And for the people that haven't, they don't know what it's about. So he's a drug dealer that is he's about to go into jail, and he has 24 hours to report to jail, and he's kind of like, you know, reflecting on his life before he goes into prison. So, and the 25th hour is, of course, the final hour before he goes in. So, you know, it's an interesting concept too, and I think that time restriction made the movie a little more interesting and a little more like the pacing was there because it had such a limited time frame to tell the story, and there was a lot of like kind of memories and stuff before he went in. It's a movie that did it for me, and it's one that it's not an easy rewatch like a bunch of times, but it is rewatchable if not for the performances alone. Again, like when I was saying earlier about Gangs of New York and like the performances, you know, making me inspired. Like this is another one of those movies because it has such a great ensemble cast that just really, you know, it makes me jazzed as an actor. And this was also at a time where I was really into Edward Norton.
Yeah.
And all of his work. So like it just, you know, it could have been just the time that I watched it too that I appreciated it more. But the movie still holds up, and it's, I think, one of Spike Lee's forgotten films, but it's definitely worth watching if you haven't seen it, or worth reviewing if you haven't seen it in a while.
Yeah. Very cool. Thank you for your thoughts on 25th Hour. So my sixth film is 25th Hour. Like I said. Yeah, a couple of quick trivia here. Did you know that Edward Norton, well, he says he took every penny he made from Red Dragon to finance this film, and that Tobey Maguire bought the rights to the original novel with the intent of starring. Later, he had the obligation to do Spider-Man, and he just stayed on as a producer. That's why you see his name in the credits.
Yeah.
And yeah, David Benioff of Game of Thrones fame. That was his novel that he adapted. But cool, yeah. A couple of things about this film. I'm a huge Spike Lee fan. You know, I grew up a hip hop head, so I'm a DJ. So like any film that takes place within like urban hip hop culture is like up there for me. And you know, Do the Right Thing and all of his early work holds a special place in my heart for that reason. But I do agree with you that this film is one of his like less transgressive, is that the word? Or like less aggressively like.
Yeah,
he always feels like he has like a chip
to him, and this
Yeah.
one didn't adhere to it as much.
Yes,
there is still a little bit of it in there.
Of course, yeah, but if it feels like most of his films, if not all of his films, feel like it has a chip on its shoulder, like he needs to kind of right the wrongs of, social injustice, and that's his prerogative. That's that's what makes him. That's what makes Spike Lee Spike Lee. So I don't want to take anything away from that, but on the rare occasion that he makes a film not about black people, 25th Hour, Summer of Sam, maybe like Inside Man, which had black characters in it, but like that take place with like an alternate perspective, it feels like it reveals another layer of him, and in a good way. And I feel like whenever he directs another writer's work, it benefits him as well, because he doesn't have the redundancy of being in his own head and his own doing repeating all of his themes and his habits that he does all the time. He still has his style in here, but it feels a bit more mature, from another writer here. I love this film. Yeah, it's a little bit, like you said, a little heavy-handed at the end. Spike Lee has a problem with that. He's the least subtle filmmaker I've ever seen. Him and like Oliver Stone, right? Like all those like NYU, Scorsese to a lesser extent, but like all those like NYU like 70s filmmakers are of that ilk. But yeah, man, I love this film, Edward Norton, and to kind of go back on what I said earlier about it, I feel like he wasn't a good Will Graham in Red Dragon. I got to give you the context of, I every time when I watch Red Dragon now, I always put it into the context of the Hugh Dancy version of Will Graham, and that is much more layered and subtle. So again, it's not his fault
Hannibal, though. I was comparing Hugh Dancy to Edward Norton.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Because I also saw Red Dragon before I saw Manhunter.
Oh, okay. So it's
Manhunter
not.
was like another movie that I watched. I had to watch a couple times before I really appreciated it, because I knew Red Dragon so well because I loved that movie so much, and Manhunter was different than what Red Dragon was.
Right.
So, like, just stylistically different. And there are things that I appreciate about Manhunter more than Red Dragon.
Yeah.
But again, like, yeah, we can get to that later.
Yeah, it's nothing, not to take away anything from Edward Norton's performance in Red Dragon. I didn't mean to belittle it, or it's just an unfair comparison, but it's always what I'm doing now these days, because Hannibal was so great and such a personal favorite of mine, so
it's a great show.
It's a great film. 25th Hour, going back to 25th Hour now. I saw it, like, I remember it had like a limited release in LA, and I went and took my friends to see it, and I loved every minute of it. It was one of those films that I was just like high off of after I got out, and Barry Pepper is such a great turn as like the stockbroker. He's just like such a specific character. All of the characters are very the characterization is very well. It has to be. It was written as a novel, so it's very difficult to get that wrong. But cool, yeah. I guess we both love this movie. 25th Hour.
Yeah.
Both are number 6.
Highly recommended.
Yeah, absolutely. What's your number 5, Chris?
So my number 5 is 28 Days Later.
Oh wow, okay.
Danny Boyle.
Yeah.
And I am a big horror fan, so I'll lead with that. But this movie, first of all, I think changed the game as far as like zombie movies go.
Yeah.
Because was there a fast zombie movie before this?
No, World War Z later, but yeah, no, not before this.
Yeah, I believe it was the first one, because that was the first time that I had seen it. And I'll also caveat that these aren't technically zombies. Mm-hmm. They are not living dead. These are infected people.
Yeah, infected humans. Yeah.
Yeah. So and that's a big point of contention for zombie purists. They're like, they're not zombies in 28 days later. But yeah, and it's shot in it's shot on like a camcorder, like video.
Oh wow.
And it's like it gives an almost documentary feel to it, which adds to the immediacy and like the stress that the characters are going through. So you follow Cillian Murphy, who later I mean, he was. I won't say jumped to fame because he was arguably already famous, but in the UK, but he was in the Batman movies and everything. But anyway, he's the lead in this. He wakes up and he finds London like completely deserted, and then he comes to find that these infected people are now trying to run at him and eat people.
Yeah.
So he figures that out that way. Then he meets a lot of people on the way, and it's Christopher Eccleston is in it as well.
Oh wow!
And he's the military guy that he runs into later that he's trying to seek shelter from and stuff, and Christopher Eccleston is trying to teach like the not zombies, the infected people like behaviors and stuff to try and like use them as weapons of war or whatever. But anyway, it's a compelling film in the sense that it's really fast paced. It's zombies, quote unquote, like you've never seen them before. And because they're running, like it makes it more adrenaline pumping.
Yeah.
And Danny Boyle, of course, is a great director. It's written by Alex Garland, who wrote my favorite book of all time, The Beach, which Danny Boyle also made into a movie with Leo DiCaprio.
Yeah.
A movie that I love, but the book is way better.
Mm.
And Alex Garland has become kind of a tour de force unto himself since then. I mean, he did Ex Machina. He did that movie Annihilation with Natalie Portman, and he directed those. And then he directed that movie that recently came out called Men.
Oh, and he did Devs as well, right? The TV series?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
great. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, so he's someone, because I love The Beach so much, he's someone that I follow. I haven't actually seen Devs. I think because I didn't have Hulu at the time, then because that was a Hulu show, right?
Yeah, 2020.
Yeah, and I didn't have it at the time, and then I just kind of forgot. I have it now, but I just forgot to watch it. But did you watch it? Is it good?
I did, yeah, when it aired. I loved it, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, then I'll definitely check that out. But yeah, he did. He also wrote the screenplay to Dread, the remake,
the Carl Urban one.
And he also did the movie Sunshine, which
right.
Danny Boyle also directed.
Okay, so they're great collaborators. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I don't think did he do 28 Weeks Later?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't think he did actually.
Yeah.
But 28 Days Later is the superior film anyway.
Yeah.
And it has great performances. Again, like Cillian Murphy gives a bold performance. Naomi Harris is in it as well. Brendan Gleeson, and like I said, Christopher Eccleston. And it's a very like intense movie.
Absolutely.
And I think it also shaped how horror, because this was 2002, so this was like, right before like the Splat Pack became a thing.
Okay.
With Saw and Hostel and
okay.
Hills Have Eyes and all those movies, and this movie precedes all of those. And it became like, I think like 20 Days Later was first in as far as that kind of like this transgressive, immediacy, fast paced, like gory, like white knuckle ride. The tension is just off the charts in this movie. Because again, you're figuring, and this, by the way, Walking Dead used a similar motif.
The visual motif
where,
of him in the hospital, right?
What's up?
The visual motif of him in the hospital, waking up, like nobody's around. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the same thing, but 20 Days Later did it first. Where so like when you saw 20 Days Later, it was new. This guy walking around, he wakes up in a hospital. He doesn't know where he is. he sees that nobody's there, and then all of a sudden he sees that these things are trying to eat people. So it was very intense at the time, and Walking Dead paid a great homage. Walking Dead, I think, is great too. But like 28 Days Later was, I think, ahead of its time.
Absolutely.
And so that one is, I think it's recommended for everybody, but I think for horror people specifically, I think they need to check it out if they haven't seen it.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, I'm not a huge jump scare guy, and this movie has one of the most intense jump scares when they jump through like that sunroof. And I watched it at my friend's home theater setup, and literally jumped out of my seat when that scene came on. So thanks a lot, Danny Boyle and filmmakers.
I'm not big on jump scares either. I think they're kind of cheap, but occasionally they are effective.
Yeah.
If done well and if earned.
Yeah, and if spaced out, yeah, and you're right. And if the suspense is done right, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. So that was your number 5. We're getting into the meat of our list here. That was your number 5. I was about to say Panic Room, but that's 28 Days Later. All right, yeah. My number 5 is kind of a horror film. I guess not really, but it is M. Night Shyamalan's Signs.
Oh, interesting. Well, so this is actually my number 4, so we can actually talk about this now.
Okay, cool. So this is his third film, M. Night Shyamalan, after his overnight success of The Sixth Sense and his lesser, received film Unbreakable, which I didn't get at the time, but everyone was expecting another Sixth Sense, and of course were let down. And Signs is kind of like underrated to me. I feel like it doesn't get a lot of praise. It was well received at the time critically. I don't know, financially, it probably made a profit. Turn a profit.
I would actually argue that this is his most underrated film.
Sure, yeah. I seen it like maybe once or twice. I saw it when it came on theaters, and I probably rented it, and I never returned to it again. I never did like a Shyamalan retrospective, so. But yeah, it's one of my favorite Shyamalan films. I love, the concept of, we are inundated with these signs from an extraterrestrial race, and they're creepy, they're big and strong, and it's essentially like a chamber mood piece with Mel Gibson and his brother, played by Joaquin Phoenix, and his 2 kids going through kind of a trauma with his wife dying. And I love the thematic parallels of him losing his faith. He's a pastor, I believe, right? Those are the people that can get married, right?
He's a pastor. He's a reverend, I think.
Oh, reverend, reverend.
But he left his faith.
Yeah,
after,
he left
after his wife.
After his wife died, and he completely lost faith. And of course, a traumatizing event like that would do that to anyone. But I love how it kind of bookends and dovetails at the end, where the big reveal. There's always some kind of everyone always kind of, I don't know, puts him down for his that's his structure. He always needs to have like a big payoff at the end, and this one wasn't that big of a payoff, and I liked it more for that, because I feel like he was doing that too much. I don't think Unbreakable had that, but he's growing as a filmmaker at the time.
Unbreakable had the ending where they found out they were in a comic book.
Oh, right, and that Mr. Glass was like the villain, kind of.
Spoiler alert.
Oh yeah, sorry guys. I should have prefaced this whole podcast by saying we might have minor spoilers for the films we're talking about. I completely forgot about that. But yeah, man, underrated film. It was one of the films I rewatched, and has a lot of creepy moments. I had to turn the volume down at some parts, because that's where the jump scares really get you, is the sound. So I loved it. I haven't seen it in a while, and I'm glad I revisited it. So yeah, please talk about your number 4 film, Signs.
Yeah, so Signs, like, again, what I said was, I think, his most underrated film, and I think that's because people thought the ending was dumb, because the little girl, Abigail Breslin, Mel Gibson's daughter, she leaves water glasses all over the house. and they think, and the water becomes the alien's weakness.
Yeah.
So when they get water poured on them or whatever, it burns them. And people thought that was dumb, that aliens that have a water weakness would come to a planet that is 75% water.
Okay.
That was not quite a hang up for me. I feel like there are many, many reasons why an alien race would come to a planet with this many resources, and especially one that's already, has an economy of resources.
Yeah.
So you don't know, and it's never explained, and that's fine for me. But like, I can make the assumption that the aliens came here for more than just because they had water. Because they, just because the planet is 75% water doesn't mean that they can't just stay on land.
Mm-hmm.
And they can use whatever resource. Maybe copper is the most precious resource to that race. You don't know. So, like, and it's never said, of course, so you don't know. But I think that's enough. The fact that you don't really explain these alien species at all is enough plausible deniability for why they came to Earth. Like, it could be a completely different reason that has nothing to do with water. Yes, they don't like water. That's not why they came to Earth, So that was never a big hang-up for me. There wasn't really a twist at the end.
Well, the twist was that, the wife died for a reason. Was for, she kind of saw into the future that the Joaquin Phoenix character would be swinging, right? She was just kind of like
away.
Yeah. She kind of
By the
foresaw
way,
that.
as a baseball player, I love the baseball reference.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, fantastic.
But yeah, and the other thing too is, have you read Save the Cat by Blake Snyder?
I don't think so. No.
It's one of the best screenwriting books. It breaks down the story structure in a great way, and his beat sheet, the Blake Snyder beat sheet, is something that I use for all my scripts. But in the book, he does trash Signs a lot, and he thinks that Signs is an example of double mumbo jumbo, which you're not supposed to do in a film. Which is like, so if you have a movie about an alien invasion, you can't also include vampires, because that's, you're asking the audience to buy two different things.
Okay.
So that's his theory. And what he thinks is that Signs is talking about him being a reverend and the existence of God, but also an alien invasion. And those two things conflict because, like, the Bible doesn't accept aliens or something like that. I disagreed with that because I felt that they don't necessarily contradict each other at all. The Bible doesn't mention aliens, but it doesn't mean that aliens can't exist, and it also doesn't mean that aliens themselves can't have their own God. And they might have had their own Jesus. They might have had their own Messiah that came down from God and helped their species, just like Jesus helped our species or whatever. There's nothing inherently contradictory, and that's my belief anyway. So I didn't really buy his argument on that, but that was what he said, was that, like, he because at the end of the movie, spoilers again, Mel Gibson puts on his priest collar or whatever to show that he regained his faith. And Blake Snyder thought that was kind of dumb because, like, there were aliens, so obviously there's no God. Like, that was his reasoning for it, and I didn't really buy that. I think that's those two things aren't naturally, contradicting. So what I liked about the movie was, I thought the characterization was great. Of all the characters, you knew where they were all coming from. They were played expertly, because Mel Gibson is a wonderful actor, a very underrated actor, because he does mostly action movies and he doesn't get appreciated for that. Joaquin Phoenix, of course, is a powerhouse, and this was before he was, like, huge. In fact, right after this movie, he did The Village with M. Night Shyamalan.
Okay.
But they were both fantastic. Rory Culkin. It was Rory Culkin, yeah.
I believe so, yeah. One of the Culkins.
Yeah, he was the son, and Abigail Breslin, who became her own powerhouse kind of later, like, they both gave great performances. And it was really creepy. They had such great creepy moments in this film. The whole kitchenette scene where M. Night Shyamalan's character locked one of them in the pantry, and Mel Gibson goes to check on it, and he uses like the knife, the butcher knife, as like a reflection to try and see it. That's a great scene of building tension because you don't know what it looks like yet. And then, of course, one of I think it's included on like scariest moments of all time, is the birthday camera footage.
Yeah, from Brazil. Yeah.
So there's in Brazil, they're doing this newscast, and in Brazil they're showing this footage from a birthday party where one of them caught the alien on camera, and someone's like pointing the video camera down this like alleyway, and all of a sudden the alien like just walks by and everyone screams. And it was so effective, like the way they shot it. And apparently M. Night Shyamalan shot that himself, like he was holding the camera.
Oh, very cool.
And then there was another great beat when Mel Gibson's in the cornfield, and he's walking through with his flashlight, and he hears something, and the flashlight goes off, and he starts like banging it to try and get the light beam back on. And when he gets it back on, you see a leg go into the cornfield, like the alien leg, and then he just freaks out and starts running. And I saw in the behind the scenes thing too, like that leg was just a leg on a stick, and some crew member was just turning it and like pulling it into the cornfield.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of ruins the mystique of it, but it was such an effective scene. And M. Night Shyamalan is really good at that type of stuff. Like, I mean, Sixth Sense, of course, is a masterpiece. Was that when you did 99? Was that on your list?
Yeah, it was. Yes.
Yeah, Sixth Sense. That is a masterpiece, and of course, he probably will never top that because that is just such like an untoppable film.
Right. He set the bar so high to his own detriment almost, but he did kind of come back with he was kind of, I don't want to say blacklisted, but he was not very respected after he just kind of repeating the same movie over and over. And I can't really speak to that because I haven't seen all of his films, but I do remember, him being shit on by critics a lot. And he didn't come back.
It kind of happened after The Happening.
Right. And then after he did Split and then like Glass, like he's kind of more respected now. So he's had a crazy career. But can we sorry to like rush you there, but I think we talked about Signs for a long time here. Do you have anything else you want to say about it, or?
I mean, there's a lot I could say about it, but yeah, like I don't want to keep going on Signs. I mean, the point is, I love this movie.
Yeah, it sounds like you did your research
and underrated films.
It's one of your it's a horror film, so it's right up there in your alley. So that's Chris's number 4, Signs, M. Night Shyamalan. Let's get into my number 4, which is Talk to Her, by Pedro Almodovar, his 14th feature. Jesus, he's prolific. It's a moving and unsettling story of 2 men caring for 2 women accident victims. I'm reading that from the IMDb trivia. It's much more than that, but I feel like it is. I'm a huge Almodovar fan. I feel like he's just so singular auteur, singular voice. One of the greatest queer directors of our time, and most of his films, he's a Spanish director, which I make that distinction because Spanish European has a much more European kind of moody feel to it, right? Very atmospheric. Europeans tend to embrace more mood than plot, right? So a lot of his characters are very not rambunctious, like he's very colorful and very just original. But this film is like one of the most straightforward, accessible films of his. It's a very straightforward kind of melodrama, like I said, about 2 men who care for 2 women in a coma. Have you seen this film, Chris?
I have not. Yeah.
This film and All About My Mother, which were made in kind of the same kind of time frame, one of my favorite films of his. And I feel like this film, which I just saw last night, so it's really fresh in my head. Very fascinating plot.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely check it out. All About My Mother is another one that, like, at the height of his power there. So, and it's the most accessible of his work because he's very kind of weird. His characters are very colorful and weird and eccentric. So,
Yeah, and he did that movie Tie Me Up, Tie Me Down, right? Which is I think it's NC-17.
right, and he did like Bad Education with Gal Garcia Bernal. So he's very
Yeah.
prolific. I know he had some kind of scandal too. So
Oh, really?
yeah, something or another. But yeah, I highly recommend Talk to Her. It's fresh in my mind. That's why, for some reason, I recapped the film like from beginning to end. There, sorry about that, but I'll probably end up cutting a bit of that.
No, I'm still gonna check it out. So either way, I'm glad you told me about it because it gives me a reason to watch it.
Very cool, awesome. What's your number 3?
So my number 3, we've talked about it already a few times. It's Red Dragon. So I really love this movie, and I'll try to keep it short because I know I've talked at length about the other movies on this list, and we've already mentioned Red Dragon. I think that this is for the longest time I thought this was better than Silence of the Lambs, and I don't think that anymore. The more I watch Silence of the Lambs, the more I've come to the conclusion that it's an absolute masterpiece. And Red Dragon, while great in my opinion, is not quite at that level. But at the same time, I think, and again, like I haven't read the books, so this is all I have to go on. Red Dragon was, again, part of my, I had seen it already, but I went and revisited it when I got on my Edward Norton kick.
Yeah.
So, and I loved Edward Norton's character. I loved Will Graham. I'm like, that's a character that I could play. You know, like I felt connected to that character in many ways. It has a great ensemble cast. You know, of course, Hopkins plays Hannibal Lecter, and we know how great he is at that. Ralph Fiennes as Dollarhide. Harvey Keitel's in it. Emily Watson, Mary Louise Parker. We mentioned Philip Seymour Hoffman. I mean, it's a fantastic cast, and it carries the film, and it kind of elevates it above, like, you know, a lot of studio horror films are a lot of no-name kind of people because they don't. Horror is what sells itself. They don't really need name actors for it. And this movie, which is, you know, kind of arguably not a horror movie, you could say it's a crime thriller like Silence of the Lambs, but it does have more horror elements, I think, than Silence of the Lambs did, because you see more of what Dollarhide does. But, you know, I think it was well put together. You know, Brett Ratner is obviously a controversial figure, and I really like his movies. I really love the Rush Hour films, and I liked After the Sunset a lot. But Red Dragon, I think, is my favorite of his movies, and I think he did a really good job with it. I prefer it to Manhunter, and again, like, I love Manhunter in a lot of ways. I think stylistically, I think Manhunter is very slick, and I think it's a more slick film than Red Dragon. But I think because Red Dragon is more grounded than Manhunter, because it was very stylized, it felt a little almost Miami Vice. You know, it was directed by Michael Mann.
Yep.
But Red Dragon felt more grounded and more real, more closer to Silence of the Lambs or Seven, or, you know, those movies that I love. And so I really appreciated it. And of course, the acting is great. And this is also a movie that, you know, whenever, like I told you about the movie that's similar to this that I wrote, which is called the Devil's Dynasty, and it's like a supernatural horror detective thriller kind of thing. And this movie is one that I rewatched while I was writing it. And every time I write anything close to, detective thrillers, I will rewatch this movie. So the reason why this is so high up on my list is because it's an infinitely rewatchable movie for me. And I know that's not for everybody either, because I know a lot of people don't like this movie at all. I know a lot of people, hold Silence of the Lambs up to a very high regard, and Red Dragon is like, ugh, that movie kind of a thing. Because it feels like, I honestly don't know, like a hack job, or like, it's just like an inferior Silence of the Lambs, or even Hannibal, which Ridley Scott directed, the movie. So, I don't know, but some people don't like this movie at all. I really enjoyed it, and I will continue to rewatch it because I think that it does really great stuff in it, and I'm not ashamed about it.
Yeah, no, it's right up your alley. You love these kinds of films, and you write these kind of films, so of course it's going to be rewatchable for you. It's rewatchable for me in a different sense because I'm so familiar with the tale, having read the book and
right.
And Hannibal being like one of my favorite shows of all time. So when I rewatch it now, I'm always like comparing and contrasting, but in a good way. I'm like, oh man, they did this really great. Or the Francis Dollarhide, the Richard Armitage one was a little better, but I still love Ray Fiennes in it. He's just a bigger name too, and it's just like a creepier face. Richard Armitage is too pretty kind of for me, but I'd love just to see all iterations of the novel, just because I'm so familiar with it. You know what I mean? So I like to rewatch it for different reasons, but it sounds like it should have been on my list, but I'm glad it was on yours, so we can talk about it a little bit more. So very cool. That's really high on your list too, number 3.
Yeah.
Awesome. So my number 3 is another foreign film. It is City of God, which technically came out in, again, 2003 in the States, but came out in Brazil in August of 2002. And I remember seeing this movie several times in theaters, and I don't do that a lot. Well, I don't do that a lot these days, but I remember back in the day, just if you guys listen to the podcast, one of the things I did back in the day a lot was smoke weed before I went to the movies. So it was like a very a traditional pastime of mine. And this movie was like a perfect stoner movie because they all, smoked weed in it and were kind of like hippies at heart. But it's like the Brazilian Goodfellas. It's just a sprawling crime epic that spans, I don't know, a decade. Might make a decade. But it spans a long period of time and checks in on a bunch of characters. It's a very like hyperlink film, so and it's very kinetic. It's a very kinetic, fast pace, and a different world. Foreign films offer you, a different lens to see the world through, and it's very engaging, very riveting period of time to check in on Rio de Janeiro, in the slums of Rio. So, have you seen City of God, Chris?
I have seen City of God, and this was a hard film to keep off my list, actually. It just felt so, like, immediate. And, you're watching it and you're thinking, oh my God, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And it was just so, like, and it was depressing. It was dark, for sure. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's not entirely rewatchable, because it's like, do I need to put myself through that? It's like watching Schindler's List again.
Yeah, that's a little harsh. It's got a lot of light moments, and it does have a very hopeful ending. All right, I'm very curious to know what your number 2 is.
So my number 2 is Catch Me If You Can.
Oh, okay.
You had mentioned that earlier.
Uh-huh.
This, I mentioned Gangs of New York is like, oh, Leo's the second best actor in this. This is another movie where he would be the second best actor in it, because Tom Hanks is in it with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Catch Me If You Can is in my top 5 Spielberg films of all time. And I'm not sure why I love it so much. It's definitely different than Spielberg's regular films, and it's also different from like John Williams' regular films. because John Williams scores it, and he does a great score, and it's a very low key, like 60s, almost Mad Men ish kind of a score, like pre Mad Men. But it's very engrossing. So DiCaprio plays this real life criminal named Frank Abagnale Jr., who is a con man, and he basically cons people. He pretends to be a teacher, he pretends to be a pilot, he pretends to be all sorts of things just to get money. And Tom Hanks is the FBI agent, Carl Hanratty, who is tasked with finding this guy who's like swindling people out of all this money. Christopher Walken gives a phenomenal performance as DiCaprio's father, and he was. I'm like 99% sure he was nominated for an Oscar, for being Leo's dad, and he was great in it. A young Amy Adams was in it.
Oh right, yeah.
Martin Sheen played her dad, but Amy Adams, before anyone knew who Amy Adams was really, was in it. James Brolin was in it. It had a great cast. And again, this is a Spielberg film, so it's kind of paced like a Spielberg film. Like he has the 2.5 hour kind of epic kind of pacing going with it, but it's never boring because it's Spielberg and he's a genius. And you're constantly rooting for Leo because he's such a likable guy, and you're also rooting for Tom Hanks because he's also a likable guy, and Tom Hanks is actually the good guy. He's doing the right thing. He's trying to catch this criminal. So it's a very interesting thing where those two characters end up really liking and respecting each other because they come in contact a few times, and DiCaprio just continues to evade Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
And it's because he's so charming and likable, and like, oh, I can get away with this, so bye.
Yep.
And then Tom Hanks comes in and goes like, "What? Where did he go?" Kind of a thing.
Right. He pretends he's Secret Services at one point. And that was a great scene.
It's a movie that's unlike Spielberg's most of Spielberg's movies because he does a lot of really big action epics, and this is more of arguably a comedy thriller. Where because it's very humorous in the way that Leo does things. It would never have been. It was arguably number one on my list.
Okay,
but I do have a different number one. But it could have been number one for me.
Yeah, very cool. I recently saw Catch Me If You Can like a couple of days ago, and I forgot how much fun it was. And it's probably because I haven't seen it in so long, but it just felt so fresh to me. So, all right, yeah, that's great. That's Chris's number 2 there. And my number 2 is very similar in terms of it's also directed by Steven Spielberg. It's Minority Report. Made earlier in the year in about like the summertime, I believe after like Attack of the Clones. So I'm a huge Philip K. Dick fan. You talked about Blade Runner earlier being one of your favorite films. Here's another neo-noir science fiction film, very original kind of genre mashup. And Spielberg in kind of his dark period with, AI, this film, and like War of the Worlds later on, you know what I mean? So I believe, are you still there, Chris?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, yeah, I thought you like cut off there. But yeah, Philip K. Dick is most known for, Blade Runner and Total Recall being, one of his more famous adaptations. But I believe
Love Total Recall.
Me too. Minority Report is one of the underrated ones. It probably wasn't as well received because the plot was probably like a bit convoluted, too overcomplicated for modern audiences at the time. But I loved it. I ate that shit up, and I remember seeing it, and it just took me by surprise. It was like, Tom Cruise. I thought it was just going to be like a run-of-the-mill like action thriller sci-fi film, but it was just so smart and challenging. And took me completely by surprise. Stars, Tom Cruise as the head of the pre-crime division. It's like 2029, and they stop crimes before they happen. The rest of the cast here: Colin Farrell, Samantha Morton, Max von Sydow. Yeah, you're right, man. He's very underrated in terms of a dramatic actor. Although I loved him in Born on the 4th of July and all his heavy dramatic works, Eyes Wide Shut, Magnolia. Previously, he did it was on my 2001 list as well, Vanilla Sky, who Cameron Crowe actually introduced Tom Cruise to Steven Spielberg on the set of Vanilla Sky when Spielberg had a cameo in Vanilla Sky, and then subsequently Spielberg put Cameron Crowe in a cameo in Minority Report. If you look closely, he's the guy who he's on the subway, and the guy sees Tom Cruise in like a video newspaper. That's Cameron Crowe there.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's actually interesting.
Yeah, interesting trivia there, huh? So yeah, he had a cool run of films here: Vanilla Sky, Minority Report, War of the Worlds, and I love Spielberg's dark period here with, he's probably a little existential period with the death of Stanley Kubrick here. So it's great to see that spill over into a director's body of work. Ditto, like Ridley Scott when his brother Tony died, and he did Prometheus and what have you. And a lot of people shit on that, and I don't want to digress even further, but I love it when directors kind of can show their state of mind in a film, but like kind of indirectly. There's my number 2 film, Minority Report. I'm very curious to know what your number 1 film is, Chris. Please tell us what it is.
So my number 1 film is Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers.
Oh, okay.
There is a union now between the two towers, Barad-dûr, fortress of the Dark Lord Sauron, and Orthanc, stronghold of the wizard Saruman. The peril of the Ringbearer deepens. An unseen danger draws closer, for there is another who hunts the ring.
They stole my precious, and we want it.
And so first of all, I think the Lord of the Rings films are masterpieces. And in fact, I think Two Towers is my least favorite of the Lord of the Rings films. I think Return of the King would be my number 1, Fellowship would be 2, and then Two Towers would be number 3. But that being said, Two Towers is a great film, especially the extended edition. And you just, those movies are so, like, similar to Star Wars. They're just so engrossing to me. And I remember you saying earlier when we mentioned it that you weren't huge on, was it Lord of the Rings in general you weren't huge on?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, like, for me, it's different. Like, I love those movies. But yeah, Two Towers was, I think, the best action film of the 3.
Mm-hmm.
And, that could be a plus or a minus depending on where you stand on action films in general. But it has some of the best action sequences, and it was mostly action, that movie.
Yeah.
Fellowship of the Ring was a lot of pretext and drama and, like, walking. And,
right, a lot of chasing.
Yeah, and Fellowship of the Ring had some great stuff, too.
Yeah.
And that's why it's actually... And again, like, Two Towers is probably my least favorite of the 3. But it's still a great film.
I don't
want to take anything away from it.
Right. Sorry to cut you off. On just like a technical, like cinematic level, it's just mind blowing how they. When anyone makes a film, I'm impressed. Because it's so hard to make a film. But Jesus Christ, for them to film this back to back to back, how can you not be exhausted? I just get exhausted thinking about it, and just a gargantuan feat for them to get those together, man. I'm impressed.
Shot it in 15 months straight.
Jeez, man.
It was a lot, because I watched all those documentaries.
Right. It reminds me too of like the last Game of Thrones season. Like I watched the documentary of that, and when I watched that documentary, I could just see the sheer exhaustion, on everyone's faces. Like I physically cannot do this anymore. And when I see that, I'm just like, wow, like I'm just impressed that they got it done. You know, say what you will about that final season, but I'm just like, thank you for working on that. You know, that's what I always think about. So great, thank you for sharing.
I'm with you on Game of Thrones because that one, they went all out.
Yeah,
you know,
for sure.
Whatever you think of how it ended, which I'm okay with. It was a little anticlimactic, so I'm all right with it. And they gave you like the Battle of the Bastards?
Oh right, yeah.
Yeah, and that was great.
Sure. Cool, man. Well, thank you for sharing your list. That was Chris's number 1, The Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers. All right, let's end the show there.
Well, what's your number 1?
All right. Well, I'm glad you asked that, Chris, because, you know, I was just gonna end the show right there.
No way, man.
You're talking about anticlimactic. Cool. My number 1 is Adaptation.
She hates me. She's disappointed. I could see it in her eyes when we met. I've got to stop sweating. Oh, she looked at my hairline. She thinks I'm bald. She's thinking I would never in a million years sleep with this guy.
We think you're great.
Oh, thanks. Wow, that's nice to hear.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I know it was on your honorable mention.
That one just missed my top 10.
Yeah, it was on your honorable mentions. I remember you mentioned that. So this film was very personal for me. I was in screenwriting class at the time, in Mr. Rosenberg's screenwriting class, and I wasn't huge on structure, so I probably should have taken a page out of that from this film. But let me read the quick synopsis from the adaptation trivia here. Based on writer Charlie Kaufman's struggle to adapt the best-selling book The Orchid Thief by Susan Orlean, Kaufman quickly got writer's block since the book lacked the dramatic structure needed for a movie. So he decided to write a screenplay about himself struggling to write a book adaptation, exaggerating many of the story elements and characters and making up new ones, such as a non-existent twin brother Donald Kaufman. Knowing that the producers would reject the idea, he did not tell them about the new direction in which he was taking the story and simply handed in the finished script. Although this move was supported by Spike Jonze, the director, Kaufman himself believed it would end his career, but it didn't. So, pretty much a very experimental studio film about him like deconstructing his own adaptation just really struck a chord with me. You know, like on top of that, I was very similar to Charlie Kaufman. I had a receding hairline in my mid-20s, sweated profusely around beautiful women, and, you know, was a struggling, aspiring screenwriter. You know, although I didn't have a screenplay as great as being John Malkovich, I fancied myself, had probably, you know, delusions of grandeur that I probably could write a script like that. But yeah, man, I love this film. I love the fact that the third act is like written by another person, by the fictional character Donald Kaufman, who is like the extroverted like id of his personality, pretty much. Like he gets the women. He as he says in the script or in the film, that he's oblivious through life, whereas like Charlie Kaufman worries about what people think like incessantly. It's a bit moody. It's a very moody film. Feels very like European in that sense. Very somber, very like existential. You know, Susan Orlean's just like kind of meandering a lot of times in voiceover about, you know, the nature of not reality, but of like existence through, you know, the adaptation or the story of John LaRoche, who is an orchid thief, orchid poacher. I didn't even know there was such a thing until I saw the movie. Yeah, man. What did you think of this film?
Well, so again, this just missed my list. A Charlie Kaufman style movie that is very meta kind of makes sense, but kind of doesn't really matter because you watch it and you're entertained the whole time because it's also funny. You know, like they're kind of dark, but they're also really funny. And like he just has a way that, you know, is really I don't just unique to him. And so I appreciate Charlie Kaufman so much that I understand why it's your number one.
Yeah.
And if I had seen it more than once, it definitely would have been in my top 10, but it might have been in my top 5.
Right. Yeah, you're right. It's very funny. All the times that Charlie Kaufman's making fun of Donald Kaufman for pitching him a screenplay, a slasher film called The Three, that they're all one person, they're all split personalities. Like, oh, it's just like that in the denouement. He's like, oh, that's not how you say it, or don't say pitch, or he's just like all these like inside jokes that screenwriters, we both as screenwriters would enjoy, and I love even the turning point of the film is like when he visits Robert McKee, who is played by Brian Cox. And me and my friend always quote that part where he's like, "You cannot have a protagonist without desire. It makes no fucking sense." And and he has the principles like that you were just telling me about. Like you have guidelines or principles that you follow, and I wouldn't knock your commerciality, because you're gonna be raking in the dough. You're gonna be wiping those tears with $100 bills. So me, I'm probably just gonna be stewing in my own pretension here. But
I don't know about that. I think I'm far from wiping my eyes with $100 bills. But,
you'll get there, man.
But I appreciate Charlie Kaufman's originality. And,
right.
And I, by the way, I believe that there is a way to marry the two. Like, I think you can be, commercial, and you can be uniquely artistic, like Charlie Kaufman. There's a way to do both.
Okay.
And I firmly believe
right. That's a topic for a whole new other podcast, but no.
But I firmly believe that, and I think that it's not mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
But like for adaptation, like I think too that Nicolas Cage gave a great performance, one of the most underrated performances. My favorite Nicolas Cage performance personally is Matchstick Men.
Okay. I haven't revisited that enough, but I gotta watch that.
Yeah, I thought he was great. And that was the very next year, I think. I think it was 2003.
Oh, nice. Sam Rockwell and Ridley Scott, right?
Yeah. And that was a great film to me. And that would be in my top 10 for sure that year.
Nice. Let me close out this real quick before we end the podcast, but I wanted to read this quote from the adaptation trivia. It's a paragraph from Donald Kaufman's script The Three is shown at the very end of the film's closing credits, and it reads, quote, "We are all one thing, Lieutenant. That's what I've come to realize, like cells in a body, except we can't see the body, the way fish can't see the ocean, and so we envy each other, hurt each other, hate each other. How silly is that? A heart cell hating a lung cell," end quote. Cassie from The Three. And it goes on to say, there is a theory that claims that this paragraph actually reveals the hidden meaning of the film, which is adaptation, that Donald, Susan, and Charlie are the three, figuratively and literally. Like, you're talking about, wow, that is genius. I didn't even think about that, but
yeah,
that sums it up right there. So yeah, that's my number one adaptation. I want to thank you, Chris. I've taken so much of your time here for being the guest. I know we could talk even longer if we wanted to, but
we've talked, I think, too long at this point.
Yeah,
it's my absolute pleasure. I can go on forever about movies of any year.
Do you have any thing you want to plug, like a website or a YouTube page, or?
I mean, my website is just chriscotto.com. It doesn't get updated that often, but I do have stuff on there that I'm trying to get made. Yeah. As a director, I'm mostly an actor and a writer, so that's mostly what I do. But I have a film in production right now called Angels Fallen 2: Warriors of Peace, with Denise Richards and somebody else, another big name that we can't mention yet. But that's half shot, and I'm going to be shooting my part in the film
when I go down to LA, at next month, and I'm really excited about that. It's a sequel to a movie called Angels Fallen, which is filmed everywhere or shown everywhere, like it's on Vudu and Amazon and wherever you see your movies. So I'm trying to get a lot going, and they're all dependent on certain factors.
Yeah. Very cool, man. Well, we will put your website, the link in the description of the YouTube page, so you can check out more Chris Cotto's work there. And you can check out past episodes of The Lazerboy at thelazerboy.wordpress.com. Type in The Lazerboy on YouTube. And I want to thank, again, my guest, Chris. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you for having me. This was a blast. I'll come back anytime.
Oh, yeah, please. It'd be my pleasure. Thank you so much, guys, and